All right, so now our homework for today is going to be called translations, reflections, rotations, or dilations. So I'm dealing with all transformations, but this case I'm just going to deal with one. So let's take a look at question number 1. Special cases. When it comes to reflection and rotation, special cases, the formulas are given in our notes. So make sure you take a look at the notes. So reflection across the y-axis, that's a special case. So now I'm going to look on our notes, and it says reflection across the y-axis, xy becomes negative xy. So once again, I'm looking at our notes, reflection across the y-axis, xy becomes negative xy. Okay, so the way I'm going to work this, first of all, let me get the coordinates that I have to begin with. If I'm looking at L, the coordinates of L are 1, negative 2. If I'm looking at M, the coordinates of M are 3, negative 2. And if I'm looking at K, my coordinates are 1, negative 3. So I look at the coordinates I have to begin with. Now, our rule says negative xy. So all I'm doing is change the sign on the x. So if I want to know L prime, I'm going to have negative 1, negative 2. Right, just change the sign on the x value. If I want to know M prime, my answer will be negative 3, negative 2. Once again, just change the sign on the x value. And lastly, if I want to know K prime, it will be negative 1, negative 3. On the homework, I will ask you specifically for one point, and just give me the coordinates of that point. You don't have to type in the letter. So if I ask for L prime, all I'm expecting for the homework is the coordinates of L prime. Don't forget the space after the comma. If I'm asking for M prime, just give me the coordinates of M prime. So on the homework, I'll be specific on which point I'm asking. You don't have to type in the letter. Just give me the coordinates of that point. Now let's take a look at question number 6. Translation. All right, translation, x minus 2, so that basically means 2 to the left, and y minus 2, that basically means 2 down. When it's a graph, translation, I can literally count the spaces, 2 to the left and 2 down, but if I don't want to count the spaces, let me start to begin with the coordinates as I have them. So if I look at my point C, it doesn't matter which point we start from. If I look at the coordinates of C, I have negative 3, 2. If I look at B, I have negative 2, positive 2. If I'm looking at A, I have the points 1, 0. And if I'm looking at D, I have the points negative 2, negative 3. And here it says x minus 2, so I'm going to subtract 2 from x. So if I look at C prime, just looking at the x value, negative 3 minus 2 gives me negative 5. To get the y value, it says y minus 2. So 2 minus 2 gives me 0. If I want to know the coordinates of B prime, right, subtract 2 from x, so that gives me negative 4. Subtract 2 from y, that gives me 0. If I want to know the coordinates of A prime, I'm going to have negative 1, negative 2. And if I want to know the coordinates of D prime, I'm going to have negative 4, negative 5. Once again, translation, when we have the graph, it's easy to tell. You could have followed the point 2 to the left and 2 down. All right, follow any of these points, 2 to the left and 2 down, and you easily can get the coordinates that you need. All right, so let's take a look at question number 7. From 7 through 10, I'm asking the same thing. Give me the coordinates, but here I'm not going to give you the graph. So let's take a look at question number 7. So to begin with, rotation 90 degrees counterclockwise. This is a special case on rotation. So 90 degrees counterclockwise, I look on our notes and it says rotation 90 degrees counterclockwise, xy becomes negative y x. So the x and the value are going to flip, but the y value, the one that was y to begin with, I'm going to switch the sign. So looking at Q, that's my y to begin with. So remember that the x and the y are going to flip, and the y value, I'm going to switch the sign. So if I wanted to know the coordinates of Q prime, my answer would be 2, 1. So I flip, and I switch the sign on the y value. If I'm looking at R prime, my value will be negative 1, 0. For S prime, it will be negative 1, 2. And for T prime, it will be 4, 3. Remember, the X and the Y switch sides, and the Y value switch signs. Once again, on the homework, I'll be specific on one point only. Let's take a look at question number 8. Now, dilation means I'm going to multiply by the scale factor. In this case, 0.25. Because my scale factor is less than 1, if I was to graph these images, I expect it to get smaller. All right, so if I'm asking for G prime, multiply the X and the Y value, multiply each of them by 0.25. So that gives me negative 0.5 and then positive 0.25. All right, I grab the calculator if necessary and multiply each of them by 0.25. Now, if I wanted to know H prime, multiply the values of H, multiply each of them, go times 0.25, and that gives me the point 0.01. If I'm looking at I prime, multiply each of the values on I, multiplying by 0.25, that gives me 0.5, 0. Next, I'm multiplying each number times the scale factor. In this case, 0.25. And lastly, let's take a look at J prime. That's going to give me negative 0.5 and negative 0.75. I multiply each by the scale factor. That's on dilation. Let's take a look at question number 9. Now, this type of questions, actually, let me erase this. This is not a special case. I will do these on graphs, but I won't do it on homework, on just the notes. Now here, rotation 90 degrees counterclockwise. Do take a look at the notes. This is a special case. 90 degrees counterclockwise. It says that xy becomes negative y x. 90 degrees counterclockwise is this xy becomes negative y x. So my x and my y are going to flip, and my y value, I'm going to switch the sign. So if I wanted to know J prime, my answer would be 3, negative 1. So notice how the x and the y flip, and notice how on the 3, I switch the sign. All right, so let's take a look at I prime. My answer will be 1, 0. If I'm looking at H prime, my answer would be 3, 5. And lastly, G prime, my answer would be 4, 2. Once again, X and Y flip. And the Y value, the number that was Y to begin with, I switched the sign.